reinforcements were on the way. In the meantime, South Carolinians had occupied all the vacated federal positions and were surrounding Sumter with a necklace of batteries on the harbor islands. Early in the charged new year of 1861, they began a project that greatly interested Anderson. In Marsh's shipyard on the Charleston waterfront, well in view of the fort, carpenters were hammering together a peculiar structure. They worked under the direction of Lieutenant James Randolph Hamilton, the descendant of a South Carolina governor, who had resigned his commission in the U.S. Navy to take command of the ambitiously named Navy of South Carolina. With no fleet at his disposal, Hamilton set about building a movable waterborne gun platform. Looking something like a cross between a barn and a covered bridge, the floating battery was 100 feet long by about 25 feet wide, built of heavy pine wood logs hewn a foot square. Its broad face was pierced by 4 openings easily recognizable as gun ports. Around them grew a shell of boiler plating that, once laid down, got crosshatched with vertical strips of railroad iron. Eventually, a pair of 32-pounders and 2 42-pounders, cannon that threw balls of those weights, would be trundled aboard. These were big guns, and Hamilton counterbalanced their weight with a 6-foot-deep wall of sandbags along the back of his battery. Beneath the sandbags lay the magazines that held the vessel's gunpowder. The shot it would propel was under the deck, just behind the cannon. If this maritime creature were not odd enough, it was joined by a floating hospital containing several beds and 2 operating tables, riding on a separate raft that would tag along behind the battery sheltered by its iron facade. Some members of Company D of the South Carolina Artillery Battalion, who would be working the battery's guns, were sufficiently skeptical about its armor to name it the Slaughter Pen. Others thought it would capsize before the iron sheathing could be tested. Their doubts were echoed happily by one of Anderson's engineering officers. Captain John G. Foster wrote a report saying, "I do not think this floating battery will prove very formidable, as it can be destroyed by our fire before it has time to do much damage." His commander wasn't so sure. Major Anderson had been an artillery instructor at West Point, and his gunner's eye didn't like what it saw taking shape on the Charleston shore. He was worried enough to write Washington, "I should like to be instructed on a question which may present itself in reference to the floating battery, viz., what course would it be proper to take if, without a declaration of war, I should see them approaching my fort with that battery? They may attempt placing it within good distance before a declaration of hostile intentions." The question evidently demanded a cabinet meeting, at which, in a flash of spirit, Buchanan said that Anderson should crack away at them. But that boldness quickly evaporated. The president wanted to slow the momentum of the gathering conflict until he could hand off this colossal can of sharp-fanged worms to his successor. So what Anderson got in response was a spate of nothing disguising itself as a directive. "If you are convinced by sufficient evidence that the raft of which you speak is advancing for the purpose of making an assault upon the fort, then you would be justified on the principle of self-defense in not awaiting its actual arrival there, but in repelling force by force on its approach. If, on the other hand, you have reason to believe that it is approaching merely to take up a position at a good distance, should the pending question not be amicably settled, then, unless your safety is so clearly endangered as to render resistance an act of necessary self-defense and protection, you will act with that forbearance that has distinguished you heretofore." In late February, a Charleston-based New York Times reporter, clearly of strong Union leanings and generations away from any pretense of journalistic objectivity, watched the battery being launched. Arrived at the Palmetto Wharf, I saw a small crowd gathering, which each moment increased as the news spread through the town. By 8:15 at least 5,000 people were present, and the unknown quantity, called by many the Slaughter Pen, rolled heavily and clumsily into her new element. They haven't christened her, and when they do, it is my private opinion that it will be done in the blood of all who embark in her. I hope the Richardson